Um, all right. Well, while Fanke tries to navigate herself back into the conversation, I'm just going to open this webinar, given it is 12:01 already. I'd like to welcome everyone for joining us today on the first webinar of the Spotlight series on co-design. This is our 8th installment of the Spotlight series. And yeah, so welcome. My name is Agustina Gancia. I'm the lead for capacity building at Health Translation SA, and I'll be your host for this series, which will run over the course of the next 4 weeks. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Ghana people as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region. I recognize the Ghana people's cultural, spiritual, physical, and emotional connection with their land. I honor and pay my respects to Ghana elders, both past, present, and all generations of Ghana people now and into the future. So I am actually on Ghana land, but if anyone who's attending is joining us from somewhere else, feel free to just put it in the chat box and tell us where you're joining from. Now, what is a Spotlight series for people who haven't attended any of these webinars before? The Spotlight series is an initiative launched by HTSA in November 2021, so a couple of years ago now. And it was built as a way to build knowledge and capacity in a range of essential research translation skills and topics. So each Spotlight series focuses on a different topic. And we do this through a month-long focused education initiative. And this includes 4 online webinars where we hear from a range of experts, and we dedicate our social media to sharing resources related to this topic. So if anyone has a special resource they would like for us to share this on this specific topic, this is the month to do so. And like I mentioned before, this is our 8th Spotlight series. And the previous series covered topics like implementation science, research impact, community engagement, the MRFF, health economics, patient-reported measures, and research and policy partnerships. They are all located on our website. So if you would like to hear some of the past webinars and read some of the resources that were shared, please feel free to do so. And who's Health Translation SA? Briefly, HTSA is an NHMRC accredited health research translation center. We offer a collaborative, cross-sectoral approach to research, and we enable the translation of findings into improved patient care. As an organization, we have 11 academic research and healthcare agency partners, and that encompasses the breadth of the health service delivery across South Australia. So essentially, what we seek to do is to connect health researchers and health services with the right stakeholders and partners to accelerate the implementation of their research discoveries. Our vision is to accelerate the translation of research findings to improve the health of South Australians, and we work with our stakeholders as independent catalysts and as a broker to mobilize all of these collaborations. And how do we do this? Well, we do this in a range of different ways. And the Spotlight series falls under the education and training, component of our organization. So today we have 3 excellent and experienced presenters. We have Dr. Mark Mackay from Complete the Picture Consulting. We have Dr. Nadia Corsini from UniSA, and also from UniSA, Associate Professor Fanke Pang. Mark is going to deliver the first presentation on the basics and the principles of co-design, and also looking at the question, are we asking the right questions? Then we'll hear from Nadia and Fanke, who will tell us a bit more on how they've applied this methodology in their work, looking at loneliness and women's health and well-being. So before I hand over to Mark, I'm just going to quickly introduce him. Mark is a director of Complete the Picture Consulting. He has over 30 years of experience in providing business research and strategy development. Before setting up Complete the Picture, He worked in the private industry and across various state government departments, including health organizations, treasury, finance, and economic development. His passion is to encourage and embed creative and problem-solving thinking. So we'll have the chance to listen to Mark's presentation, and then we'll directly go to Nadia and Fanke's presentation, and we'll open up the session for questions and answers. So if you have any questions as the speakers are going, please enter them in the chat box, and then we can address them at the end of both presentations. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Mark. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks. I'll just swap in my screen. You can see that okay?
Yes.
So again, welcome. And my name's Mark, and I'm going to talk to you about co-design today. Before we begin, I'll just get rid of the photos out of the side of my screen. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Kaurna land on which I am on and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So what I want to achieve today is to introduce you to design, and specifically co-design, hopefully get you to think a little, hopefully have some things that will make you think, and convince you also to dig deeper into design. This is clearly an introductory sort of talk, and we don't have a lot of time. This is something we could talk about all week, but we don't have all week. We've got today's session of an hour, and I've got about 20 minutes. So let's get going. So many people are, when they're in their workplace, are told, don't come to me with problems, come to me with a solution. And I suspect many of you online will have heard that. If not said to you directly, you'll have heard it said to somebody else. So what happens in that situation? We have a problem, we do some thinking, and we come up with a solution. And ideally, we take it to our management and they endorse it and it's implemented. So what happens when we do that? Well, instead of a solution, there's actually a range of potential solutions. So you probably already started to filter out solutions as part of your thinking process. So if we had a hypothetical wall of solutions of, that I'm showing here is 24, well, we'll filter out based on perhaps what we've heard. So if I'm trained as an economist, I will be thinking along the economic lines. If I'm trained as a scientist, I'll be thinking in the particular area of my science, and I'll narrow down things that I've heard about. I'll probably also narrow them further down based on what I'm interested in or in terms of my skills. And I might have a number of options, but then I'm also faced with resource constraints. Those resource constraints might be time, they might be money, they might actually be objects that we have to put in place to create the solution. And we come up with one solution that we put to management. Sometimes it might be two. There's nothing wrong with that in some circumstances. In fact, day to day, you're often presented with things that you need to address. That's fine. It works. However, for more complex problems, are we missing something? And so we're losing something when we do this, and that's we're not contemplating the bigger space. So my question to you is, are you really the expert? So if you're working in the health translation space, be it in a hospital or healthcare setting, or you're a researcher, you're probably highly trained as a clinician, as a researcher, and you're an expert. Might be in one field, it might be in several. But in being the expert, that doesn't mean you've experienced the journey that the people who will use your solution or are the patients or clients, depending on the sort of service you run, will experience. So what do you understand about their experience, their journey, and what does their context bring to that journey? Does it matter or does it not? And leaving aside the user, be it a patient or another person in your organization, it might be an end user, What about what you can learn from other industries or other fields? If we think about patient flow as an example, something that I'm interested in, then what about the field of logistics? What does that offer us? Is there something we can learn from those who schedule planes, schedule freight, Amazon as an example, that we could apply in healthcare? So other fields might have something to teach us as well. So in reaching that single decision, we're making assumptions, and assumptions can be bad. And it's a matter of where you sit. So your position in the organization. Are you junior, senior? What you've experienced, so your history, your training, where you've worked. And you're making these assumptions all the time. So critical thinking is key. But is critical thinking enough? I'd say not. I'd say you need some other frameworks. And that's where we begin to introduce the idea of thinking like a designer. So you may have heard the term design thinking, and it's been around a while. It's not new, but for some people, it's still a challenge. For some, they may not have heard of it at all. But the idea is we get people to think like designers. And you might say, well, what's a designer, Mark? Someone who does industrial design, someone who does printing. Well, let's pick on architects as a simple example. I want a house built. Okay, I've got a problem. I need a house built. So if I approach an architect, how do they know what to build? Well, they'll ask me some questions. They're going to discover and get some insight into my needs. What is the problem that you're actually trying to address, Mark? It's a house, yes, but is it an apartment? Is it a one-bedroom sort of house? Is it two-bedroom? Is it three? Do you need garages? Is it going to be double-story? So once we've discovered what the problem is, we're going to start to scope it down. So we've got this expansive period where we better understand the problem. Then we're going to define things, bring it back. So I now understand that it's a 3-bedroom home you'd like, but you'd also like a study in there because you work from home occasionally. And yes, you'd like the double garage, but your budget is constrained by so many thousands of dollars. That's fine. So we now better understand the problem. Well, now I can go away and create some drawings for you. So I'm going to come back with some drawings. I'm going to put them in front of you, and we're going to have a large number potentially to consider up front. Large number is relative, of course. And then once I've seen them, given it's the house that I hope to live in, then I'm going to narrow it down, say, I like this one. So let's work on that. And that's what gets delivered as a solution. Okay, so that's understanding the problem, considering what might work, and then focusing on the potential solution. So expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. That's not the only way of designing things or presenting this idea of thinking like a designer. Jean Litke is someone who's worked with some of my colleagues interstate, and she's based in the States. So she's come to Australia a few times. She's quite into the application of design thinking. She visualizes it as a different sort of diagram, and she shows the individual steps that a business person or a health services research person might apply to tackling a complex sort of problems. And we have many wicked problems where you'd say they're more complex, more difficult, and would benefit from this sort of approach. So we need to understand what is, so the current situation. So that's doing some evidence gathering. So if it's patient flow, it might be journey mapping. If it's a patient going through the system, that makes sense. Value chain analysis, mind mapping, some brainstorming of ideas. What if we could do something completely different? No constraints. Now we've got to constrain it. So we've understood the idea, we've problem, we've expanded our potential solutions. Now, what might work in our context? Let's prototype it, see what actually does work. So we're going to have a few pilots, small scale, so low risk. Okay, we have a failure or two, maybe some successes. Those successes we then implement. So the what works we actually implement. So we've got a nice process, probably better defined than the diamond, but both are engaged people differently. So I present both of them. But along the way, it poses those questions. What is, what if, what wows, and what works? They're not just to be answered by the problem solver, but they're meant to be answered by all those involved. And what do I mean by all those involved? Well, I'll get to that in a minute. So asking the right question actually matters. If you're doing research, you'll have your aims mapped out. You'll have created a proposal. You've got some grant funding, and you're busily working away on delivering that research. If you're working in a health service, you might be tasked with making some changes to add a new service, improve a service, change it for some reason. And again, you may have selected a preferred solution, but did you ask the customer or the user or the beneficiary of your research what is the problem they would like tackled? So understanding that right question really matters. That's where that thinking like a designer becomes imperative, and they spend a lot of time on getting that right. So I've talked about design. What about co-design? Where does that come in? Well, if we think of the problem-solving mindset, that original diagram that I showed you, what's the problem? Don't come to me with a problem, come with a solution. This is applying the expert mindset. Yes, you might have someone who sits above you in terms of your organization structure that will approve your solution, but they're relying on you to bring a solution. You're an expert. The other end of the continuum of problem solving is participatory mindset. This is where we get lots of people involved. So traditionally, we've been down this end of the continuum. What co-design seeks to do is move us along the continuum, but not all the way to the end. So I can still use design thinking and apply it to users where I'm not necessarily getting their input. I might work with a team rather than being alone. And I guess I've seen banks do this. So this is where I'm doing it to users, and we call this behavioral design. Where I get some more involvement from people, the users, so it might be a customer, might be a patient, might be a beneficiary of research, but I only get a little bit of involvement, and it might be around the early stage. It might be a little bit feedback around potential solutions. I'm doing it for users. So we call this human-centered design. However, if I'm doing it with the user, I call it co-design. Okay, so this is where I get users to be involved in the journey all along the way. So that is co-design. Now, the next step is where I'm not doing it as a problem solving and bringing others in to work with me. I'm getting the community to lead the design process. And you'll find that's happening a lot with First Nations work, where it is community-led design that is being sought. So really, it's not my idea or my team's idea anymore. I'm not going to do it to you, even though I think it's a benefit for you and others like you. And I'm not going to doing it for you. Rather, I want to do it together with you. So I'm bringing you into the process and others like you. So by you, I mean a plural here. So a number of users that represent the population of people that would be benefiting from either the research, the service change, whatever it might be, the problem is that you're looking at. So the process is, again, can be represented by a nice visual where we explore, build, revise, launch, deliver, embed, and debrief, and reflect. And what we learn in that reflection means we go through the process until we continually improve our system and until we're happy with the end result. Now, does that map to that earlier design thinking? Sure, it does. The what is, the what if is the explore build stage. The revise is the what wow stage, and the launch, deliver, embed, debrief, reflect is what works. Okay, they're just slightly different visualizations. So yes, it does overlap. It's just a different way of presenting it. How do we get that engagement with users? That is, I guess, a critical piece of the work. So designers have lots of tools that they use to get users will come into an organization, particularly if you're doing a health service type research, improving a service or trying to understand where it might be improved. And yes, doctors are present, other health professionals are present. I'm a patient, you're the professionals. That could create a barrier. So we need some tools to make it a more welcoming experience, and where everyone feels like they can contribute no matter who they might be and what their background is. So some of the engagement tools include things like collages, mind maps you might have heard about, storyboards, if you've ever seen how they create movies, we can use things like that. Inspiration cards can get people talking about what the future might look like by showing pictures of what they believe it could look like. Modeling, that could be using Lego, and you can combine Lego with storytelling as well. Or it could be trying to create a physical space using cardboard boxes, or you could do it on a computer. It depends on your time. If you're building things like apps, it might be wireframe diagrams. And of course, brainstorming is involved as well. And once you've got that engagement, that's great. Yes, I also understand that you've also got to engage your management with the solutions, because potentially they have to approve it, and there may be some other constraints that come into play, such as policy and change management. What about things that might influence our design process? One of the things that I've encountered over time is the use of averages. Nothing wrong with using averages to summarize data. We do it all the time. The only problem when we're thinking about design and creating solutions, particularly in service industries, particularly in a health space, is it such a thing as the average patient? So if we go back not that long ago, around World War II, the US Air Force was experiencing some planes crashing. Why? They had fixed seats in the cockpit. So tall pilots were having problems, short pilots were having problems with using the controls. What they did, they measured over 10,000 airmen, and they measured them on a whole range of factors, and they found that there was no one person who was the average airman. So as a consequence, today you'll be driving in cars with adjustable seats. That's because there's no such thing as an average driver of a car either. We're all different heights, we're different sizes. We need that ability to vary the seat. But if we apply that same sort of thinking, what if we're trying to fix the solution? There may not be one solution, but a number of solutions, because our users aren't average. Just think about a hospital that provides services to the whole range of humanity. So we're going from pediatrics to geriatrics. A pediatric service focuses on children. A geriatric service focuses on the elderly. Are they the same? If we put their age into the continuum, clearly they're not, but an average age for the service might be 40 years. So who are we designing for? The average age, or specific groups who use our service? That's where the term persona comes up with. The designers will use this to reflect different people who might be going to benefit from our solution in our problem-solving exercise. So just remember, if you're using averages, steer away from them for a little bit and look at the underlying populations that you're working with. So are there benefits in using design and co-design? Certainly there are. Early engagement with users means you invest now, you get their input, and you create solutions that they will agree with and they'll benefit from. Saves a whole lot of time. You've got a better idea of what the real problem is, and it could be not just one problem, but several problems, because you're getting more than one view, okay? And it's your colleagues' views, but also those of the users or the patients. And you'll have a better idea of what the solutions might be. And if you follow the process and do piloting, you'll have some opportunities to try things before you try and embed them. So if it doesn't work, you can improve it, or if it does work, you can scale it up. And if it clearly doesn't work, you can abandon it, saying, yes, we tested the idea, but it's not for us now. And please remember, consultation is not co-design, so very different. Does it pay to use design? There was a study, and I know it was 2014, but there hasn't been a replacement study or an update of this work since then. And if we look at companies based on stock market indices, then yes, there's a huge difference in the companies that are using design. If you think of Apple, they pride themselves on their design. Their value is a lot higher than companies that aren't using design. What are the downsides of using design? If you're engaging with users, that means it takes time. You've got to get them into the organization. You've got to find time to do it. Even if you're engaging with stakeholders in your organizations and your colleagues, you need time, you need space. And by exploring and trying to build a better understanding of what the real problem is or the problems are, you're going to do a whole lot of research and activity that is a bit messy at the beginning. But during that messy period, you'll get better and better refinement of the problem and the solutions, and eventually come out with some really good clarity and good designs. But it's noisy. And for people who are, I guess, more concrete managers, they may not like this, okay? They don't appreciate that, oh, we're making progress. Oh, we've gone backwards a little bit today. Oh, we're making progress. It's getting better. It takes time, and that engagement can frustrate people who are more concrete. So when you get approval to do this sort of work, you really need the person who's approving it, the project director, the CEO, to be on side. They need to understand what they're buying into. There are some things to consider, and there's a good list that's been put out by the Metro North Health Service in Queensland. So get support, get that early, make sure you've got it. Are you doing it to do something cool? Oh, it's cool to do co-design right now. Or are you really doing consultation? If it's if you're going to do it for real, that's fine. If you're just doing it to be hip happening and be seen to be doing the right thing, maybe this is not for you. Do you have the funding to do it? Because it does take money and time and resource. Do you have time? Do you need to get someone in to help you do it? So all these things are critical if you're going to have a successful project. So I know my time's limited, so I'm happy to take questions. I know they'll happen at the end. You can always access me afterwards as well. Or my partner, Marissa, we're both into using design. Happy to have my phone number and email shared, or you can QR code me. And I've got some books, I'll leave those with Agustina, that you can use, and also some websites. So I'll stop there. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Mark. That was a really informative presentation, and I'll make sure to share some of those resources across our socials as well as part of the Spotlight series. That was a fantastic talk. I would like now to introduce Nadia and Frankie for the next presentation. And then if anyone has any questions for either Mark or the second presentation, then we can address them after they speak. So Nadia is a senior research fellow at the Rosemary Bryant AO Research Centre at the University of South Australia, and she leads the Consumer Lab, CoLab, which I think she will tell us a bit more about today. She is an experienced behavioral scientist who's worked extensively with consumers, industry, government, and non-government organizations on research and evaluation projects in health service and community settings. So fantastic background. And Fanke is an associate professor and a professorial lead and enterprise fellow of product design at the University of South Australia. She's an award-winning educator, designer, and researcher with a passion for design-led innovation. And in recognition for her contributions to higher education, she was awarded Senior Fellow of the Higher Education Academy in 2020. So I would like to hand over to Nadia and Fanke to tell us a bit more about their project.
Nadia, do you like me to go first? Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Fanke Pen. So as you heard, my background is design, and I do quite a lot of like a co-design project for design-led innovation. So hence for today's presentation, I actually choose several projects using co-design as an approach towards intergenerational practice and well-being. And I'd like to start with a current project called Co-Design, an intergenerational arts and movement program for essay, culture, and linguistic diverse communities. So this project received research funding from Arts and Health Alliance last year. And the team, because it's a transdisciplinary project, and we have academic team members from quite diverse background, so including product design, architecture, arts education, psychology, allied health, and human performance. And it is joint force with 4 different universities, including HTSA, the University of Adelaide, Flinders University, and Charles III University. Besides the academic cohort, we also have various industrial partners involved at the beginning of the project. So as Mark mentioned before, it is quite important to have those key stakeholders in our co-design project. And one thing I'd like to highlight here is because we are dealing with wicked problems. So in terms of wicked problem, just means because it's so complex in the current society, so hence we cannot just use, for example, designers' capability or skill set to tackle the issues. So even as designers, we do collaborate with people from various backgrounds and engage with key stakeholders. So for this project, we have 2 stages. And to visualize it, on this slide, I just use this kind of double diamond model. Double diamond model was first being introduced by the British Design Council. And since 2005, there are so many variations of that model. So the one I put on the slide, in my opinion, it's very informative and to give you all the information, what you do need to consider. So in terms of whole design thinking process, it is like a convergent and divergent process, iterative process. But basically, I think what we are trying to do is to understand the question, the challenge first, before we jump into the solution. So for this particular project, the first stage, we do conduct scoping review. As academics, we do like our secondary data collection. So we did a scoping review, trying to understand in terms of co-design for intergenerational program, what has been done worldwide. But we also have made a contact and interviewed program leaders across 5 councils. So just go back to this slide I shared earlier. So that's including Mount Barker Council, Port Adelaide, Enfield, Unley, Campbelltown, and Adelaide Hills. We also interviewed program leaders from some of the service provider instead of including the Fabric, which is to do with arts program, and Act Now Theatre and COTA. So what we'd like to do before we go into the co-design workshop in the second stage, trying to understand what has been done at a local level. And I have to say, that's quite important to prepare us for those co-design workshops. And we learned what has been done and what's the current gap in terms of the intergenerational arts and movement program in South Australia. And I have to say, most of the council, they are doing intergenerational program because they got inspired by the ABC TV series. I don't know whether you already watched it. It's called Older People's Home for 4-year-old and Older People's Home for teenagers. And there's obviously current gap as well, simply because for the council's program, it is focused on the mainstream. So many like English speaking participants who can access all those kind of surveys. But in terms of other like language or culture groups, they do have a kind of like a separate program running and mainly focus on healthy aging instead of intergenerational play and practice. So based on what we did at in the first stage, we are going to conduct more detailed co-design workshops, and we choose the cohort from the current industrial partners who already built this kind of connections with the locals. And that will really help us to generate more insight to develop our program at the second level, the second diamond stage. Because the project only have run for half a year and we haven't reached that co-design process yet, so I cannot share any further detail. But because of that, I'd like to bring in some of the my past project I already did. So for this topic on its own, intergenerational practice and well-being, it's something I did for quite a long time. So on the slide, there are a couple of projects I did while was in Canberra. So the first one is the intergenerational pen pal surveys, and the second one is for Gene-Dairy Living Lab. I'm aware of the time, so today I'm only focused on the co-design approach we did for Gene-Dairy Living Lab. So basically for this project, what we are trying to do is trying to understand in the current, again, the community level, what has been done, and in terms trying to create the first intergenerational play space in ACT, what's the current gap is, what we should do. So on the slide, it's a co-design workshop we did. It's one of the many we did and being visualized for better understanding. And especially when we're trying to share our understanding, we do find to visualize the conversation is really helpful. I'm not going to the details, but just to give you a little bit of flavor through this. And based on all the co-design workshops we did with our local participants, we managed to actually not just build the physical space, but also to create the service based on all this feedback. So before, I think, Mark, you mentioned about various like mind mapping. As a designer, we love visualize the process. We love our mapping. So there are so many other mapping as well, including like the systemic map. And also on the slide, I have this kind of service blueprints. So in terms of the service blueprints, what we're trying to do is kind of like divide the whole service into the different levels. So the levels could be like in terms of user engagement, but that also could be in terms of all the challenges they are facing in terms to access the service. And this is a combination of the different system level of service, but also trying to understand the whole user journeys. So from the beginning, like a sign up event to the transportation to the event and how you actually participate at the event, and then at the end, it's leaving the event. So the entire user journey is quite important when we think about the whole service. And by combining all those kind of pain point during the user journey, it helps us to get this kind of touch point embedded into the service we are trying to build. So in terms of survey, that's all, again, linked to the digital apps the customers and the users can use. We also create like again, those kind of more detailed stages and touch points, which could be used by the service providers. So the project I just mentioned, we published a book chapter. If you are interested to find out more, it's called We Want to Play Too, Co-Design of a Public Intergenerational Play Space and Service for Improved Mental Health for Older Adults in the Australian Capital Territory. This is a book I want to mention as well. So I only contribute 2 book chapters for this book, but there are so many other interesting projects has been documented in this book. So if you are interested in co-design and what co-design could help your project to achieve, I do highly recommend this book to you. Just to mention, at this stage, it's because it's just been published, it's only for pre-order at the moment. Another thing I want to mention, I don't know, because I don't know who are in the participant group today, but I do have a project called the Co-Design for Sustainable Youth Mental Health in Australia. So it's a project I did, again, it's a transdisciplinary project, and based on some kind of like a seed grant, we managed to do some initial research already. But at the moment, we also secured a funding for a PhD project. So at the moment, we are looking for industrial partners who are interested on this topic. So if there's anyone in the audience today want to know more or interested about co-design for youth mental health, please get in touch. Okay, so I will finish my talk soon. But before that, I just want to mention, because intergenerational practice, it is relatively new. And for those of you who are interested, there are some really good initiatives has been done. And I want to mention, starting from today, it's a global intergenerational week. And there are a lot of useful information. If you search for this keywords, you will find a website which have all the amazing things happening for the intergenerational practice. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Fanky. That was fantastic and really informative, and as well, some great resources that you shared. So we'll make sure to share that. Over to you, Nadia.
Thanks, Agustina. Okay, hopefully you can see my slides. I'll try to stick to about 10 minutes, Agustina, to allow time for questions at the end.
I don't think I can see your slides.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I know why.
There you go.
Got to share.
Yes. Fantastic. Great.
Great. So thanks, Fanky and Mark. A lot of what you talked about is a really great setup for this presentation. So I'll try and get straight into the guts of it. So the project I'm talking about today is called the Loneliness Project. And this project came about because of initial seed funding from the Women's Health Research, Translation and Impact Network. So there was an initial seed funding phase, followed by an opportunity to submit a full application for a 2-year project, which is the project that I'm going to be talking about. Now, the seed funding part set us a challenge to come up with a topic with the community in the area of healthy aging, and it needed to focus on women. So we're now 6 months into the 2-year major part of the project, and we've just finished the major co-design phase, which will be the focus of today's presentation. So I wanted to share this definition and introduce a new term, co-creation. when I came across this, I thought it was a really perfect description of the process that we undertook for the Loneliness Project overall. So co-creation refers to the collaborative approach of creative problem solving with diverse stakeholders at all project stages. And this is really what the Loneliness Project undertook. Now, we do use co-design methods very deliberately as part of this co-creation approach. And as Funky mentioned for her project, this also involves a number of academics with different skills and backgrounds coming together to contribute to this project. As well as the academic team, we have a very large team of other stakeholders. So this particular project is a collaboration with the HUT Community Centre in Aldgate, so in the Adelaide Hills, and is co-led with Fiona Dorman, who's the chair of the Premier's Council for Women. And also involved are other organisations, including Community Centres SA, Uniting Communities, and the Office for Ageing Well. Okay, so this is a summary of the co-creation project to date. And steps 1 to 7 really refer to all of the activities that happened in the seed funding stage, so the project setup. This was 6 months of the messy activity that Mark talked about, and gives I think an indication of the time taken to set up the project with the various stakeholders in order to even get to a co-design stage. So step 8, which is what I'm going to talk about today, also corresponds to 10 months of work. So we've recently completed some co-design workshops, and that has taken 10 months in addition to the 6-month setup phase, which gives you an idea of how long these activities can take. Okay, so I'm going to focus on the co-design workshops in particular. Okay, so just to go back a little bit, so the main idea for the Loneliness Project that came about over that messy period of stakeholder engagement was to address loneliness by building capacities in community centres. The community centres, you might ask, why community centres? So there are more community centres in Australia than there are McDonald's. So it's a very, very large network of physical spaces and a lot of activity for the purpose of building connections in communities. We, through discussion and review of literature, found that one of the life stages for loneliness that it has very little research attention is the stage of midlife for women. Community centres don't traditionally attract midlife women as their main audience, but see a lot of potential in broadening their scope to this demographic. There is a natural progression with loneliness that sees a bit of a peak in loneliness occur at the midlife stage. This is true in men as well, but particularly for women, this is an important transition period that can lead to, can be a time where people become disconnected. As a project team, we really saw an opportunity to have a prevention focus with this work. And by addressing midlife, not only provides an opportunity to focus attention on social health at an important transitional period, but also serves to potentially prevent loneliness later in life. We wanted to have a scale up potential for this work to take a public health approach. And so working with the community centres it could enable this, this to happen through designing a prototype of activities that could be taken up by community centres around Australia. Okay, so I'll take you through. So we The setup work that we did in the seed funding grant helped us to come up with this sort of broad topic and understand the problem. What we then wanted to do is invite women from the community centre's catchment area, so not necessarily people that are engaged with the community centre, to help us to come up with the solutions for this challenge. So we held co-design workshops to achieve this. And the design challenge that we posed to the women, and there were 22 women involved, was how can we shape community centres to help prevent and address loneliness in midlife women. The women agreed to participate in 3 sessions over 3 weeks, and there were 8 hours in total of co-design work. So I'll talk you through some of the activities that we did in 3 sessions in order to come up with and prototype solutions for loneliness. Okay, so one of the first things we did was an ecosystem mapping. The purpose of this was to really encourage our participants to think about the various aspects of a person's ecosystem that might affect their behaviours and impact on their loneliness. So this was an introductory exercise to get people thinking broadly about what is in their own social ecosystem to begin with. We then did an exercise called empathy mapping, where we came up with 5 personas that reflected a range of experiences that a woman in the midlife years may face with regards to loneliness. With this exercise, we invited people to think about to sort of sit in the shoes of that individual and think about how they might feel, what they might think, and how they might behave. We asked women to think about their own loneliness at different points throughout their life, using this chart to plot the times in their life where they felt more connected and where they felt lonely. This was an optional activity. We had some women share this as an exemplar, and it was a homework exercise that, in fact, all women very generously participated in and came up with very sort of beautiful and creative versions of this, explaining and sort of thinking about what was driving kind of loneliness or connection at different stages. And some women were willing to share this to the group. So that was a lot of the initial setup in session 1. We then moved on to the kind of main design challenge that was informed by those activities that I've just mentioned. And the question here was we posed a how might we question. How might we help women in the middle years feel more connected when they're feeling lonely? Women got into groups and we had post-it notes, and we did an activity that involved brainstorming individually to begin with, building to collective brainstorming. So the way this worked was that everyone would take a post-it note, write an idea down, put it on their sheet, and then pass it to the next person in the group, and they could add their thoughts to that. So they might add a new idea, it might spark a new idea, or they might extend that original idea. And this went on in a number of iterations until we filled multiple pages full of post-it notes that built on ideas. After this activity, the team looked at all of the notes that had been created, and we themed them into common or similar ideas. So this picture here is a sort of partway through this exercise. Now, each table had a different colour post-it note, so we were able to sort of visually see whether the themes were coming more from one particular table or whether they were truly kind of themes that had emerged from across all of the ideas that were presented. And we found that this activity worked really well and better than we thought. We ended up with hundreds of post-it notes, and we were really expecting just really a few. Based on the theming of these post-it notes, we found that there were 10 sort of main areas that people's ideas tended to sort of fall into. I won't go into these too much, but they're presented here on the slide for you to see. What we then did was I'll just go back to that slide. We used a process called dotmocracy, which essentially is giving people stickers to vote on kind of which themes were, spoke to them, or they felt sort of an affinity with and would like to see that there's potential to prototype further. So we did an activity where we gave people stickers. They went around the room, had a look at these themes, the post-it notes that were under these themes, and voted on which theme they felt had potential for prototyping. We reduced these 10 down to 5 themes, and people formed groups based on where their interest was. By the third session, at the second session, the groups developed an idea based on that theme, and we gave them some prompts in order to focus their thinking, which I won't sort of go into too much now, just looking at the time. In the third session, we went sort of deeper into this prototyping and asked the groups to consider what was at the core of their idea. So why are we doing, what is it about this particular concept that you believe is going to work? How is it different to what already exists? And by the end of the session, the groups were in a position to present a Gaddy pitch, which was a synthesis of their idea, and that kind of that quick pitch that really encapsulated what they were trying to do, what's at the core of the initiative, and what excites them about the work. So that's where we're at the moment. We have 4 concepts that the community centre is now looking to pilot, and we'll be involving the women that were part of that co-design session in furthering those prototypes and piloting them over the next 12 months. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Nadia. That was a great presentation and fantastic project. I loved having you and Fanky present after Mark. I think it was a really good illustration of, or like an application of some of the design concepts that Mark presented earlier on. There's a question online, I think it was addressed to Mark. I think we'll just answer this question. If anyone else has any other questions, please put them in the chat box, but we will answer this question for Mark and probably close the session after. So the person says, sometimes we just need one solution, for example, a research study protocol that will be applied across all participants in a clinical research. And it is not always feasible to incorporate everyone's suggestions and reach a uniform solution. What can be done in such cases? And should we weigh in someone's perspective more than other people's perspectives? Sorry if the question is confusing.
No, thanks. And Nadia and Fanky, feel free to chip in if it's appropriate. I think the challenge is the type of problem. I think it was Fanky who mentioned the wicked problem. And what we're dealing with, particularly when we're working on more complex problems, are ones where design actually can be a real benefit and co-design can be beneficial. If it's not necessarily a wicked problem, but a more simple and straightforward problem, then investing a whole lot of time and resource to go through a co-design process is not really appropriate. It's not going to pay the dividends that you might get from undertaking it for a wicked problem. So coming up with a protocol, that's fine. Yes, there are, you might draw upon research, you might draw upon experts, but it may not be that you're going to be doing that as a co-design project. It depends. It's I guess if you're trying to come up with a protocol that was really complex and was going to affect a whole lot of different user groups, deal with difficult problems, maybe then you would. But I wouldn't have thought it was the normal situation where you'd use co-design. The other part is who, I guess to the question is, who do you favour in terms of opinions? Well, in co-design, what we're trying to get, and design thinking in generally, we're trying to get people to participate and provide ideas. So I don't want a single voice having a dominant role. There are some activities I use with people that encourage them to participate, and it stops the dominant voice overtaking the conversation. And that is really important. If that's what you're trying to achieve, then there are activities to help reduce the power play that might be in the room or the dominant voice. And that can be really useful. I don't know if that fully answers the question, or that Nadia or Fanky has some other ideas as well.
Well, I just want to add on top of that. I think, Mark, you answered the question really, really well. And I'd like to just share experience, because there was a project when a group of designer has been brought in to do like a co-design for a wheelchair. But soon they find out actually to improve the product cannot solve the problem. So instead of doing a physical prototyping and then to do an evaluation just based on this kind of wheelchair design, instead it's turned into a 3-year PhD project, because the project will then help the client trying to look into what the real challenge to cause all the staff burnout and all the issues within the current like a hospital system. So sometimes, again, it's to do with the challenges you are facing. So co-design probably not the answer for everything, but it's like a case by case. If you are dealing with a very wicked problem, complex the system, then yes, definitely think about co-design and say, how can you actually to just trying to identify the real challenge for your organization or for the system you're trying to tackle.
Thanks, Panky. And Nadia, anything to add before I close off the session?
No, I would agree with those comments. If you are deciding that co-design is the right approach for a problem that you're facing, it's important to be aware of the resources required. Hopefully we've given you a bit of a taste of how intensive the process can be, not to scare people, but just to be aware that it does take resources and time. So it's not to be entered into, you know, without sort of good consideration of what's
yeah, like Mark said previously, just to be, you know, doing what the latest is. You genuinely have to want to do this. And great answers, everyone. I'd like to close this session now. Thanks so much for our presenters. This session is recorded and will be posted on the HTSA website at the end of the 4-week period, along with all the resources that we will be sharing through our social media. Check out the HTSA LinkedIn. Well, yes. HTSA will be posting on LinkedIn via our profile. Next week, we'll be having, again, 3 speakers, Tim Evans from WebSilk, Rebecca Farletti from Health and Wellbeing Queensland, and Don Campbell from Northern Health Victoria. They will be looking at the benefits and challenges when doing co-design. So these 3 people have different backgrounds. One is a designer, one's a health service director, and the other one is based in a research team. So we'll have another fantastic session, and I look forward to seeing everyone there. So thank you very much, and please feel free to reach out to HTSA if you have any questions. Thank you. I'll end here. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Nina. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.